A lot. We have, we just sit and talk, and we commented on that, how, we just feel it right away that we just sit and banter, and that kind of presence comes.
Yeah. But it's actually seeing it, actually things that operate in the spiritual realm, angels moving in response to our who we are and what we're doing, can happen without it being, okay, I'm sending an angel to do this. Angels are listening to what we're doing, and they're hearing us talk about together in unity God's will and purpose, and they respond to that. They go off when they recognize, here, yeah, this is something I recognize from the heart of God, and that they do things sometimes without us even having to assign them, because they see what's going on. They look and see, and they follow that and outwork that. So I just think what we have to do when we're looking at new, the heart of it is the key, not the structure. Because otherwise we can just get into another, well, we're leaning to our understanding of this new structure rather than the relational and the sense of God and the essence of God and love being in our midst. And when we're together, we know God's in the midst. Well, if he's in the midst, then that is heaven manifesting in our midst as we're together with him. And I think all of it needs to be seen as, this is a lifestyle, not something that we go and do sometimes, or we go and do another time, and it can become a naturally supernatural way of living, because we're tuned in and connected. And yeah, it's great to go to the Court of Kings. When we need a law, we will go to the Court of Kings and we'll get a law or a piece of legislation, and we'll go to the place in heaven that you need to do. But often we'll get the direction to do that by just talking, and it will be really obvious, hey, we have no legislation in place to deal with this that we're talking about. And then it's like, okay, do we have a mandate to go and get that legislation? Yeah, we do. So let's go and do it. So it all flows. It's a much more intuitive, flowing, in sort of a oneness that we function in when we're in that. And when we sort of teach it, you break it down into the component parts, and we go and do this and we go and do that, and because you're trying to break it down for people to see, hey, there are all these places to engage and things you can do. But when you put it together in a lifestyle, like we were saying earlier, it's like, by being together, we can observe and engage just because we're together, and that's really what it's like. So it's sort of making it more of a real life thing, rather than, again, getting into any sort of, oh, we have to do it this way then, otherwise it's not valid. So if we didn't step into heaven, it's not as valid, as stepping in. Well, who said that? Those are the frameworks that we tend to, we look to things that give us a structure. But as good as a structure can be to help support, it mustn't become the thing. Otherwise we just rely to the structure. So we rely on stepping into heaven rather than relying on engaging God. And engaging God is the key, not where we engage in specifically. So yeah, I think there's a lot too, when we're looking at how we do certain things from a new perspective, is making sure we don't create our own new liturgy that it has to work this way. Otherwise it will just be another thing that we've created to give us the structure for us to do things, and we'll lean to it rather than the relationship, which we should be leaning to. Anyway.
Mike, a question that I get asked time to time by people that I know that I used to hang out with, that are not into this, haven't been very good at all. over the last couple of years is saying, well, there's people doing this, they're going through, you're saying this and that. Where's the fruit? What's happening? If you ever get asked that question, it's like, if there's a move or God's doing something, you expect to see something, some fruit that comes out from it. I get asked it all the time. Where's the fruit?
Yeah.
How do you know it's just not your imagination? Well, I can tell I know it's not my imagination. Yeah. Back, well, where's the substance? Where's the fruit?
Yeah. Well, it depends entirely on what it is that you're doing and what you're looking for in fruit. I mean, if you're looking for, Jesus said, by your fruit you'll be known. Are you more in love with Jesus? Are you more loving towards other people? Is your desire more aligned with God's desire? Well, that's fruit. If people are looking for, well, where's the revival? Then they're looking for the wrong thing, because they're actually looking for something which is tied to what their previous expectations are. And a lot of what we're doing is still foundational. When you look at God moving things and doing things differently, in the transition between old and new, and you begin to establish new foundation, a lot goes on behind the scenes that you don't see, but it's all preparation for what is going to come. And without the preparation of laying the foundations, then you don't see foundations, do you? They're buried. And most of what's going on right now is about getting the foundations right. People want to see the building, don't they? They want to see the architect's thing produced so that you can see it, because they're impatient, because that's what they're used to seeing. Now we need to see it from a perspective of what God is doing, and this will take years. If you're going to, when you're looking at what he wants to do in the future, it's going to take time to get the foundations dug, the footings in place, everything solid and firm for things to be outworked. And those that are looking for, I want to see it, otherwise I'm not going to believe it, their heart is already not operating in faith, because everything has to be done in faith before you see it. And if people are saying, well, I don't believe it because I'm not seeing any result, most of the result initially is going to be in us. We know the changes that have taken place in us, and we know how we have changed in regards to our relationship with God, intimacy, love, knowing God, knowing our identity, coming into sonship. All that will eventually release the authority to begin to see those changing things. Now, there are things that have been seen. I mean, even go back 3 years ago and look at how many people were talking about and engaging these things. And now look at it. There's so many more people who have been connected and who are beginning to engage heaven. Go back 10, 15 years and you had the odd occasional thing where someone talked about a vision, or, Ian McCormack having died and gone to heaven and come back, or, Roland Butt or something writing a book or whatever, or Bill Johnson saying he had this experience. You didn't have that much of it. Well, you look at now, there's masses of it. The courtrooms, things being set up, people operating differently, testimony after testimony of results that come as we begin to operate differently. But it depends what people are looking for. And if people are looking for, hey, another airport vineyard thing or something like that, then they're looking for something old. I don't believe revival is going to happen as it's done. I don't even talk about terms of revival, because it's not about reviving something. It is actually having something new. It's not going to revive the old, because the old didn't work. As many as all those amazing things in history saw people saved, they didn't change the world, did they? And transform everything. And the world still needs to be brought back. It's sonship which is going to do that, not revivals. It's individuals operating together in relationship as sons of God, which will actually answer creation's groan and bring about the restoration of all things. You're not going to start to see that. What you're going to start to see is sons. starting to know who they are and begin to operate governmentally in doing the preparatory things and getting the legislation in place and having all those things of authority so that that can be outworked. And it's going to be the men in white linen who start to come alongside to support, and the angelic can get, well, those people won't be able to see any of that because they're looking for, you know, what they're looking for is the jewels and the gold dust and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You know, and that's not what it's about. We're in this to change the world and to see a whole generation come into sonship and be ready to draw in the rest of the world into sonship. You know, so we've got to look at it from a whole different perspective. You know, and if anyone sort of says, you know, well, where's the fruit? I don't see any change or whatever. You know, I would say, well, what are you looking for? You know, what actually are you looking for as fruit? You know, and most of the fruit that will initially be seen will be taking on the character and nature of God and love. And so for that to take place, most of the change I think is going to take place in the coming year or so is a revealing of who God really is. You know, that because what are we going to demonstrate if we think this is what God is like and we're going to demonstrate which isn't God at all? You know, so most of what religion is doing and most of what the old order is doing, to me, is actually not really reflecting who God really is. So unless we can truly see who God really is, how are we actually going to know what fruit is? So I think there's a lot in that that, you know, comes out of some a perspective which is very tied to an old way of, hey, this works because it looks like this, you know, and that didn't work long term then, and actually it's not going to work long term ahead. We need something new. You know, we need a completely different understanding, engagement with the kingdom, and the foundational laying of that. You know, we just started. In reality, you know, from my perspective, we're just laying foundations. You know, but the key is, without the foundations, there can be nothing which is going to stand firm. You know?
When we first started back way a few years,
Yeah.
I used to see in the back of my mind, and over time, more as you talk about more and more fruit from the race.
Yeah.
And it's definitely, but as I go on, I feel other people come in and leave after a short time, and I don't. If I really see that now, because you really got to want to stick with it, because it's not like you go up and all of a sudden you see the golden streets of heaven and all that. It's different. And how do you see like it opening up to the church? Do you always see that up the church?
Well, what I see is sons need to take responsibility to begin to administrate the kingdom and to legislate for the changes that need to take place. And there is still so much which is tied to, well, God is going to do it, and we're waiting for God to do it, or we're calling him to do it, and he's basically saying, well, I told you to do it. So if we're going to actually see change, then we have to facilitate that change. Now, I believe that we do need to see people encounter God and encounter the true revelation of who God is, encounter heaven and those things. But why aren't they? Well, most of it is because they're veiled with coverings of men. They're still under men's coverings which restrict them being able to do that. Well, how are we going to remove that? Well, we've got to start legislating for it. We've got to start using the legislation we've got. And we need to see light penetrate into that darkness. We need to see people stirred to come out because they just want more. So I see three groups of people that those that have been forerunners need to start legislating into, start targeting specifically. There are three groups. There are those who've left the church because it just didn't do it. So have left for various reasons, some of them because of hurts, but a lot of them just disillusioned with this isn't it, knowing this isn't it, and they're looking for something. We need to reach those people. There are those that are within the current sort of more cutting edge of things, who are being led up to, through spiritual experiences, and they're still looking for more, and therefore they're the people I would say are come up to the Jordan and are looking to how to cross, but don't really know what it is, So I think, remember, there were 10 spies that said don't cross, as to the 2 that said do. So many people are leading people up to the point through supernatural encounters, and I would say, the things that have gone on in the last 4 or 5 years. But some of those are still operating, even though they've seen for themselves. They're still not leading people in, because they've limited their supernatural experiences to things that happen in this realm rather than another. And I would say, there are people recently who brought up some issues with Jonathan Welton and people like that who are suddenly saying, oh, you don't want this court stuff. No, I don't really see any of that. Well, Jonathan Welton, I've respected a lot of what he's done and what he said. But if he's bringing, even, producing books about seeing and seeing in the spirit realm and all that stuff and encountering the angelic, but if it's all about here in this realm and not about engaging that realm, then even though they've seen things, they may well be coming to a point where they're saying, don't cross, and that court stuff, I don't have anything to do with that, because that's a new fad or whatever the thing is. And we have to be careful, that we don't get like that, but also that we recognize that there will be those who get to that point and say, hey, don't do it, so we have to target those people. And I think there's also another group of people who are in the historic churches, love God, but have no grid of reference for anything spiritual at all, and we need to prepare the way for them. Send angels out to visit them in dreams. Start, reaching them. And you may find that they find it much easier to engage than the others who have built a reputation on spiritual stuff and they don't want to let it go. So, who's going to reach them? Who's going to reach any of those three groups? Well, someone who's going to say, hey, here's a good report. This is what I was like you. I've always been looking for, and now I found it. And we've got to, I think, reach out to call that Joshua generation into experiencing their inheritance. If we just sit around enjoying what we're enjoying and not doing anything specific, well, then how are we going to reach those people? Someone's got to say, here's a good report. And I think God is looking and saying, well, who's going to go for us? Who's going to give this report? And we've got to be willing to say, here am I, send me. And it won't just happen, and I think a lot of people are too focused on their own personal enjoying of all this stuff and having fun with it, and not enough are taking it as serious as it needs to be taken to deliberately engage to bring people into that revelation by focusing, targeting, legislating, directing, calling people, reaching out to people, doing things, getting a strategy that God might give for a people group or for anything else, in it. It won't just happen if we don't call, and engage. And I would encourage you, I've got a whole lot of legislative decrees which are specifically to call for the Joshua generation, you know, dealing with religious bondage, calling for jubilee, you know, calling for things to come into agreement and alignment. You know, they're all there to use. You know, they're there because they've been given by God to use, to target, to call for Emmaus Road experiences. Some people are going to need the scales to come off their eyes by an encounter with Jesus, like the Emmaus Road encounter. Some people are going to need to, like a Paul encounter that meets with the light, that causes almost blindness because it's so intensely different from anything before. Well, I think God is saying to his people, you start legislating this, you start administrating this, because I've given you all the tools, now start using them. Because it would be sad if this whole thing that God's doing just ended up slipping back into another conference circuit, another group of prophets who are focusing people on them and not equipping people to take responsibility for their own area, city, region, nation, and do it, and do the stuff, you know. Because if no one's doing it, then you're not going to see anything change. You know, we're never going to see people come out of darkness into light unless we start sending the light, being the light, demonstrating the light, all those things. So I think there's a lot more that we need to consider of what we should be doing. You know, what are our mandates? What are we called to do? And being prepared for a harvest. You know, does God want to send a harvest to rot in a field? No. You know, does he want to send a harvest to an old barn that's going to actually store it up and never use it? No. So there needs to be a new storehouse for harvest to come, which I think is why the foundations of that are being laid. You know, we need benches who are operating together in that. We need the foundations laid for that, you know, and it takes time. You know, I look back here and look at the things God has shown us and the things God has said and done. You know, it takes years to do certain things. You know, now I would do them in weeks if it was down to me, but you have to realize that there's a journey that we're on, and there's a timing and seasons in a lot of things which you have to discern. You know, on New Year's Eve we had this marriage ceremony that it was part of our scroll, and we saw it, you know, I don't know what, 3-4 years ago. It's taken us to that point to get to where we're ready to say I will, into a deeper relationship with God. You know, marriage preparation took a long time, but I would have, when I saw it, it was like, hey, let's get married. You know, but we hadn't even done a ketubah. We hadn't even prepared. We hadn't even got to a point where people were, well, what does this mean? And realizing that you have to leave singlehood behind, and you have to leave independence behind, and all the things that go with entering into a new realm of relationship. It took a number of years for those things to be in place. And now we've done that. Now we're looking at, whoa, what is this going to mean now? You know, what is this new level of relationship? Whoa, it brings a whole new level of responsibility, as well as all the joys and wonders of relationship. There's the responsibility of relationship that comes as well. So, you know, I can see a lot of those things taking place, but we're still preparing and we're still laying a lot of foundations, I think. That doesn't mean we shouldn't be doing anything, you know, because if you're issuing a call, that call remains in the spiritual atmosphere. It doesn't just go, it's still there, you know, and you may call it now and people may respond in 5 years' time to the call you did now. But if you don't make the call, there can be no response. And what we've got to be careful at is we're not looking for an instant response, but we're having a momentum of the word of God declared and decreed from a heavenly perspective, operating as a frequency out there that people can connect with. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like really a lot of what we're doing now on the planet.
Yeah.
People that I
Mike,
very zealous over a calling that they have. They join with us for a short time and try to take what calling was better. No, I'm called to do this, I'm called to do that.
Yeah. Well, see, a lot of people are still in a place where they need to die to ego and self, you know, and that's what happens when something new comes along. It's an opportunity of self-promotion again. Hey, wow, look at all these encounters I'm having in heaven, and look at all this, and wow, the focus is on self, on what they're doing for themselves or receiving from themselves, rather than we're called into this for a love which isn't based on us. You know, the whole point of God loves, and that love is otherly. It's not for himself. It is calling people into a relationship that is oneness, that is about others. The whole kingdom is about others, you know, and there will be a degree of immaturity of people who just see this as another opportunity of rising, getting up the spiritual ladder, you know, or becoming full-time, or whatever, you know, the things that have been offered them, what they're looking for. And it isn't about that. You know, it's Jesus was gentle and humble in heart. He knew who he was, and he didn't need to prove it or use it for self-promotion, because he was there for the love of others and for the love of the world, not for himself. Well, it's the truth for all of us. If we're fully going to come into sonship, we have to realize that our sonship is not primarily for ourselves. Yes, we need to love ourselves because we are loved by God and live loved, but ultimately that is so that that love can enable us to love the world and love God's creation and love everything, to bring restoration to it, which is a very not self-centered, self-focused thing. You know? And until we get a restoration of relationship, which brings a restoration of identity, then people are always going to be trying to get it by what they do, which is why there is such a, you know, for people to be noticed, to be significant, to be seen, to have recognition, and all those things, is because then they're looking for their identity from what they do, rather than knowing who they are and that enabling them to do totally different thing. And you can tell that, you know, you can tell those that, you know, because their hearts aren't radiating love. They're needing to be loved, you know, and they're looking for love from the wrong things, even good things, you know. Because the root of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil was, I need to accomplish something. You know, I need to be like God. When the reality is, he's already like God, as we all are, in a sense, made in God's image. You know. So yeah, I think there's a need to mature and to grow up and demonstrate love from a, you know, perspective of, you know, selflessness, really, in this, in what God's doing. Which isn't very easy, is it? And, you know, it's not very easy for God to point out that stuff, which is why relationship is at the heart of it. If we truly know God, then we'll truly know ourselves, because we'll see ourselves within the image of God, and therefore we'll become the image that he has of us, you know. And that's why relationship is at the heart of everything, because that's the only thing which is going to bring, you know, out that true reflection of that image. It'll never come through our striving or effort to do something. All religious exercise comes from, I am trying to appease God or do the religious things to get back to where I was. And I'm trying to get back there by doing stuff, you know, rather than realizing I'm already there. I just need to have it unveiled and experience and enjoy it, you know, and engage it and come into it, because that's really what it's about, you know, entering into that which we're already in. You know, that's the problem. People think they have to get somewhere that they already are, and that's the deception of the enemy that will keep people always dissatisfied, because they think they have to do something, yeah. And we don't. Yeah. So have you got any other things that you got on your heart for this year, or things God's saying or doing, or? Yeah.
Norma?
Sorry, yeah?
Oh, sorry, Norma.
Go ahead. You had a question, Norma?
Well, I was trying to clarify something that Mike said regarding the using the legislation that he's done, that the legislative decrees that he's done. And I was thinking about a place that we saw, and I listened to Nancy Cohen, and it seems like the same place. She calls it the gap, and it's an overlapping of heaven and earth. And I think we've seen that place on several occasions. And she talked about it in terms of, you know, not doing spiritual warfare. And I know that that's, you know, we've been through that and we don't do that. But she's coming from that perspective. And I was thinking that when you said about the legislative decrees that you have, is that a place that we can go to and use those decrees to call in? Because it's a place that's unencumbered, where sort of heaven and earth are coming together. And we've seen that expressed in some of the times that we've ascended.
Mm.
So I'm wondering if that would be a good place to use some of the legislation to call in those that are sons.
I would say that when you talk to different people, they use different terminology for something which is essentially the same thing, but their encountering it comes out in a particular way. I would say what that description to me sounds like the kingdom of God, which is in dark and light, and we have to bring light to that realm to then, and that's where our mountains are. So when I legislate, I use the position where I'm seated in authority to legislate from. As we begin to bring heaven and earth together, that's where the as it is in heaven is established. So whatever that looks like, for me, it's the place where it's still where we are responsible for bringing light to minister out of, and that's where there are other spiritual forces that need to be dealt with, the dragons, the giants, all that sort of stuff. That's that realm. There may be other things. You may be talking about something else. For me, that's where heaven and earth, that's the bringing earth and the spheres of the atmosphere of the earth under the influence of a higher kingdom realm. So we administrate there. So that I definitely do most of my calling, decreeing, using legislation from my mountains, because that's the position of authority to use it from. Where those mountains are, she may be describing as the gap or that which connects the heavenly spiritual realms and the earthly realm, which I would say, I mean, I've not listened to a lot of Nancy Cohen's stuff, but I'm aware of some of the things that she's doing, and what I have listened to, she's pretty solid, I think, in a lot of things, and I would totally concur that we shouldn't be doing spiritual warfare like we used to try and do it in this realm. We need to do it. We need to operate governmentally from another realm, So I think that maybe people describe lots of different things, and the perspective is coming from a particular viewpoint, but actually they are really the same thing.
People used to do spiritual warfare. They used to be together, praying in the spirit, doing their spiritual warfare. I hear what you're saying. They should be going to their mountain or to their increasing mountain, declaring. Would they also be up there doing their praying in the spirit group from that mountain, or the declaration?
Well,
how do tongues fit in with that?
Yeah, I just don't pray anymore. I mean, I don't pray like, oh, God, will you do this? Or we're calling out on you or pleading to you, because I think God will just turn around and say, like he's done in the past to me, well, why are you asking me all this stuff? This is the reason I'm calling you into the places of authority in the first place. This is why I've seated you in heavenly places with me, because you're sons and you should be doing this. This is your responsibility. Grow and mature and come into that place of responsibility. So, I don't see any, anything which is me calling out to God saying, God, help, please, will you do this? Or will you, and I'm not talking about, going to the throne of grace and just being in relationship and offloading the burdens of things on our lives, because life stuff happens, isn't it? And we have to deal with real life issues. But I'm really talking about, hey, the world's in a mess, do something about it, God, type of stuff, which is why he's saying, well, it's in a mess because I gave it to you, and look at the mess you've made, now clear it up. Actually start now operating it from a realm of authority to bring change to it, because it's your responsibility. It always was. I gave you the responsibility to be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue and rule. So why are you asking me? So I think a lot of people are in that transition, realize, and I think they'll start to realize that it doesn't work anymore. All the calling out, prayer meetings, all those sort of ways of doing things will become less and less and less effective, because God is saying that's not how you do it. So prayer, what is prayer? Well, for me, it's my breath of life. I live in the presence of God and we communicate. We're joined together in one spirit. So it's just, I have a prayer gate in my spirit, which is a flow of communication. It isn't me having my list and presenting it to God. It's me going to God and receiving my assignment. It's me knowing his heart. It's me knowing his desire and aligning my desire with it and flowing from that desire, rather than all the things we used to do. So I see prayer meetings as a waste of time. It's like, why are we just all calling out on God when we can engage him and know his heart and flow from his heart and do something about it? I don't want to be hard on prayer movements and stuff, but it's old and it's dying away. And if it doesn't change, it will just become a dinosaur that's extinct. And you know, because eventually people will realize that they didn't do it any good. You know? And thus you could say, well, where's the fruit? You know?
So really what we're saying there is the old interceptors are people now that are up, getting God's heart for grain.
Yeah. Yeah. I long for people to come into a experiential relational encounter with God, which will free them up from all the performance orientated stuff, and those old ways that God has used. Yeah, I'm not saying that they weren't in previous seasons something that God inspired or used, because he was getting us to move forward. You know, yeah, he's had to get us across the wilderness to the point where we come up to the promised land and there's the river for us to cross. You know, and there's lots of things that have got us up there. Spiritual warfare, you know, which was to me more of a, hey, there's an understanding that there are spiritual things out there that we have to deal with, rather than here's a methodology for dealing with them, because I don't think it ever was. And I don't think it ever worked. Unless it was a very clear mandate that God said to do something, it wasn't something that worked. And you always got someone who said, oh yeah, we did this and this worked. Well, it did because God said it. And then someone else just took the same principle and tried to apply it, and it didn't work. Because all they were doing was using someone else's mandate and trying to make that work again and again and again, and it never did, you know. But I think God is saying now, you know, look at this as a journey. This journey is taking you to leave the places that you've sojourned in the past and stayed in and enjoyed and had blessing out of, and don't live in the old, no matter how good it might have been at one stage, because it's passing away, it's becoming obsolete. And I think a lot of ministries will become obsolete unless they're willing to embrace the new, you know. Okay, any other things you want to talk about, share about?
You know, I think it's so profound though how we started our day. I think before we went live, that was that when we get easy, it's just powerful. Talking together before we even step through, and that became more of a religious thing that I think sometimes, at least for me personally, it was more of a religious thing that we were doing. Got to go before the ark,
yeah,
do the yod hays and all that. Now I can hear from God rather than speaking just one-on-one and hearing from God, just going in the flow, like Norman said we had in our meeting.
Yeah.
Surprised me in the meeting because we hadn't gone up. But there's a flow.
Yeah. But that is it, you know, because we're looking for something. You know, we're looking for something as, you know, a formula. Well, this works. We'll keep doing that. Well, that just creates another thing that we're leaning to our own understanding of. You know, the picture for me last year was, it's like my spirit is engaging God deeper and deeper, and what I was seeing of that in my mind and the way my mind operated was like, it was like this tapestry, this picture, beautiful picture of God. But God was saying, you know, here's a thread, just follow this thread. And I'm thinking, hey, I'm going to be following this thread and getting deeper with God. And the more I pull this thread, I realize that it's unraveling this picture and image I had of God. That, of course, I shouldn't have an image of God in the first place, because an image is an idol. I need God, not an image of him. But my mind had an image of him. My spirit is connecting with him, and they don't connect, because my mind is saying, that doesn't compute. But my spirit is saying, "Ooh, this is wonderful. This is who you really are." And so I'm in this place where, my experience is one thing. The mindsets that I have to relate that experience is another thing. And God unraveled it all to reveal himself. And that was shocking, actually. It was shocking. It was almost like, whoa, this is a shock. Because I thought I was looking at you and I wasn't. I can experience you, but what I was looking at, there was a disconnect. There was dissonance. It didn't compute. And so that unraveling allowed my mind to see God. Now, the temptation would be then now I'm going to create another image, because then I can then have an image I can see, and all that will do is leaning to another understanding. So I don't want an understanding of God, but then I can hang something on. I just want a relationship of trust, which means I don't have to understand. I just have to trust. And in the relationship, trust is just outworked all the time, face to face. So I don't need an image to look at, and all those things that have been constructed within my mind to create that image just got deconstructed, and that was shocking. I mean, it was a huge challenge, because I didn't think, and as I began the year last year by legislating for the removal of restrictions, I didn't think it was going to be me that the restrictions got removed from. I wasn't targeting myself with some declarations. I was targeting other people, but God used it to target me, and that was really surprising. I mean, I wasn't expecting it, and therefore I wasn't expecting all the things which contributed to that image being exposed, unraveled, but I think for a lot of people this year, that is going to be something that God has to do. Otherwise, we will just lean to another formula, like going before the ark or going to our mountain, or it will just become another thing that we're leaning to rather than God. If we're engaged with God, there needs to be no formula, because it's relational. And if I'm relationally going to my mountain or going to the ark, and my spirit and God being one are engaging in that, wonderful. As soon as I create it as, here is something I need to do to be successful and for this to work, then all I've done is gone back to the wrong path. And I really started to see that last year as it got unveiled. Now, I do not want another understanding to lean onto. So now I've experienced God in a new dimension of love. I'm not going to make love another understanding that I create to then lean to. I just want God himself. I just want a relationship with God himself. Anyway, all right. Okay, we'll leave it there.